Namaste and welcome everyone to this Wednesday 10 p.m. show. And of course, we have Shri Vibhuti Jha as every Wednesday we have. And today we have Shri Sandeep Balakrishna. I think most people on General Dialogues would know him, on Jaipur Dialogues would know him. But just to recap, he is an author, columnist, broadcaster, and of course, I'm sure you would all have Dharma Dispatch as your compulsory reading. So that's Sandeep Balakrishna for you. Welcome, Sandeep ji, and Vibhuti ji, as
Namaste.
always.
Namaste. Namaste.
Sandeep ji's some notable works, if you don't know them already, is that fantastic book, that research material on Tipu Sultan, Tipu the Tyrant of Mysore, and his translation of Avaran. That's another masterpiece, Berappa's Avaran. And recent Invaders and Infidels. That is the first part of a series of books on the early part of Islamic history of India. So, welcome Sandeep ji, and today we are here to be coached on the history of Vijayanagar because, uh, like most Indians, we have not been taught about it. So, Vijayanagar, as we famously know, is probably the, as people say, you have to tell us that it was Acharya Vidyaranya who created out of two valiant Sanatanis who had been converted and brought back. So, please do tell us how this empire came to be.
Okay. Thank you. Pleasure to be back again on Jaipur Dialogues as always, and a greater pleasure to be interacting for the first time with Shri Vibhuti Jha ji, and as always, my good friend and partner in many crimes, Sanjay Dixit ji. So, okay, how detailed or how short would you like my answer to be? Would you like it to be brief
See,
or?
we have budgeted for about 1 hour, including audience questions. So at
Okay,
about 45 minute mark, we would go to audience questions. So, and
okay.
we are going to ask you about the origin, about
Mhm.
the glories, about the art, about the culture, about its position in the Committee of Nations of those times, and mm, Krishna Devaraya, and of course the Battle of Talikota.
Yeah, well, you'll need about 10 episodes to cover all this. But okay, without wasting any more time, we'll see how much we can squeeze in. So, always a pleasure to talk about Vijayanagar. So, just to give a background, of the origins of Vijayanagar Empire, we have to contextualize it in the larger context of the Islamic invasions that had, pretty much ravaged all of North India and including and it had made very brutal inroads into South India. So this occurred, the first Muslim invasion into South India occurred in the time of Alauddin Khalji. And more so, the maximum devastation was caused by his trusted lieutenant and his gay partner, his man Friday, literally, Malik Kafur. So he left, after breaking Devagiri, which is unfortunately called Daulatabad today in Maharashtra. After breaking that, Alauddin Khalji pretty much, had a free run, more or less speaking, because as usual, short-sighted Hindu kingdoms were fighting in South India. 4 or 5 major powers, Kakatiyas at Warangal, which is in those days, the Muslim chronicles call it as Telangana. So that is one. And then in Karnataka, you had the Hoysala Emperor, Veeraballala III. And then in the Tamil region, you had two warring brothers, Pandya brothers, Jatavarman Sundara Pandya and another Veera Pandya. And then on the other side, you obviously had this Yadava power at Devagiri. So this in general is a broad layout of, historical context. So what happened with that one brutal invasion and with all these warring powers, a lot of these people, for example, shockingly, Ramachandra Deva of Yadava dynasty in Devagiri, he actually sent his own forces to assist Alauddin Khalji and Malik Kafur to break Hoysalas and to break this guy, Prataparudra in Warangal. So this was a scene. So for the very first time, Hindus in South India had a first-hand taste of what an all-out Islamic invasion means. And it would never remain the same again. Even today, it is not the same again. So this fellow went all the way up to Rameshwaram, almost the tip of India. So for 70 years, South India became a smoking ruin, and the psychological effect, above all, more than the physical destruction and killing and slaughter, the psychological effect on the Hindus was unprecedented. Nobody could even come to terms that war can be fought in this fashion, that anybody can be so savage. So all they were looking for is some kind of solid leadership. To be precise, 68 years, Hindu South India was in a state of complete disarray and chaos. So it is that in that scenario that Maharshi Vidyaranya. I mean, some people object when I use the word Maharshi, but okay. Like you mentioned, Achara Vidyaranya or Swami Vidyaranya. His original name is Madhavacharya. Purvashrama name is Madhavacharya. So he got in two brothers, the Sangama brothers. There are actually 5 brothers total, but these two were pretty much prominent and they're very distinguished in their valor and other qualities. Contrary to, I have to slightly correct you here, Sanjay ji, that contrary to this popular perception that the Harihara and Bukka had been converted and taken to Delhi, then they came back and they were reconverted by Garvapsi done by Vidyaranya Swami. That is not true at all. That comes from this with many accounts. Foremost is it's one by Robert Siegel. So that has been conclusively disproven. So that is a small aside. So it is in
That's
this
also,
kind.
we all learned about Vijayanagar from Shyam Benegal, so we can be excused.
Oh well, okay. Well, okay. That is going a different tangent. So, see, originally the House of Sangama, in English it's called House of Sangama. So the House of Sangama were serving as Mandaladishas and military commanders. Mandaladisha is a governor, roughly speaking, of the Hoysala dynasty. Okay, you had a lot of Mandaladishwaras under every large Hindu kingdom. So these people were also one among them. Okay, like for example, their colleagues, one distinguished colleague was a great warrior and a governor called Hariyappa Vodaya or Hariyappa Nayaka. So you have legions of all these extraordinary warriors who came together and they took not only spiritual guidance from Maharshi Swami Vidyaranya, they also took strategy from him. Very few people are aware that Vidyaranya Swami and his extraordinary brother Sayanacharya, but for whom we wouldn't have these Veda Bhashyas surviving intact in the pristine form that it is today. Even today, the Veda Bhashyas which are taught here in South India or elsewhere for that matter, they are the gift of Sayanacharya and to a great extent his this illustrious elder brother Madhavacharya. So these people actually held swords, they mounted horses, and they were in the thick of the battle. They were warriors. They did not sit in some cave and meditate and say, Deko, Baya, ye log nan, and you go out and fight. No, that is not true at all. That is not true at all. So they also gave not only spiritual guidance but also strategy. And once the Vijayanagar Empire was, established firmly, these House of Sangama, all the 5 brothers were allocated to different frontiers. For example, Gomantaka, which is known as Goa today. So in all 4 directions, all these 5 brothers were appointed. So Harihara was ruling in the capital city of Vijayanagara. So at that time, both Vidyaranya Swami and Sayana and other people, wise, illustrious people, they used to be administrators, like Mahamantri. So this in general is a brief origins of the Vijayanagara Empire. I mean, just condensed it to the best of my ability.
Okay, sir. So we can move on to the notable rulers and their accomplishments.
Hmm. Okay. Obviously, the first dynasty, the Sangama dynasty, you had Harihara Bukka, then followed by his sons Veerakamparaya, Kampana the second, and Bukkaraya the second. So that dynasty went on for nearly for about three quarters of a century, and then the next distinguished great ruler comes, the Devaraya the second, or Immadi Devaraya. Uh, Unfortunately, Devaraya the second, his regime has to be, studied with the seriousness that it deserves. And it is, the kind of expansion that he did, both militarily and culturally, the influence that, the level that he brought the Vijayanagara Empire, that has not been studied with the detail and the depth and, the seriousness that it actually merits. Because, you have this towering giant like Krishnadevaraya. So he has overshadowed Devaraya the second, or Prouda Devaraya. So that was another notable ruler, sorry. And followed by that is a Saluva dynasty, the house of Saluva basically. So you had Saluva Narasimha, and he was widely known as a usurper. But whatever, when he came to power, he actually, one thing all these dynasties, the four or five houses that ruled Vijayanagara did, was that
What
they
would be the chronology be? When do you put the beginning of the Vijayanagar Empire? What year?
okay, 1336 is a traditional date, which is largely correct, but they came into prominence in 1347, and they stamped their suzerainty by 1378 or 1380. So roughly you can take 1347 as, the unstoppable rise that, they had pretty much no opponents anywhere in South India, simply because the vision given by Swami Vidyaranya and its implementation, its execution by these people was given wholehearted, unified support by all the Hindus pretty much in South India, because they had
Right.
realized that, if we repeat the same mistakes that, the Hoysalas did, there is no future for us. So this is why all chronicles in Vijayanagara and about Vijayanagara written during that time and even later, they invariably add the suffix to Vijayanagara Empire as the custodian of Hindu Dharma in South India. Without this mandatory suffix, no chronicle proceeds further. So that is
Right.
one. And the second epoch, glorious epoch of Praudadevaraya is in the mid 15th century. And then obviously you have Saluva, who came at the end of the 15th century. And by 1509, you had the ascent of this great Sri Krishna Devaraya. So this is a rough chronology.
Okay. So Sri Krishna Devaraya is supposed to be the apotheosis of the Vijayanagar Empire, and
Absolutely.
it was considered to be the richest, most prosperous, most accomplished at that point of time. So
Yeah.
do tell us why it was so renowned.
Well, one was the empire building, the sheer size of Vijayanagara Empire, which, encompassed all of South India. And they had imperial hold even over Kerala, but, Kerala is a different beast. I mean, you can see what is happening today. And see, this is the same Kerala which drove away Adi Shankaracharya, and, fought against him. Hindus in Kerala, they denied the permission to Adi Shankara they kind of prevented him from performing the last rites of his own mother. So that is one anecdotal evidence. Then you have Swami Vivekananda, as recent as Swami Vivekananda. Okay, in 19th century, he says that Kerala is a lunatic asylum. So that,
That's why it has a high literacy rate. I'm I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Right.
coming back to that, Kerala kings of Kerala would pay tributes to the Vijayanagar Empire, and largely it was under their imperial control. So the Samuris of Kerala, okay, the Portuguese word Zamorin, it comes from the word Samuri, which means a king or a chieftain or a Raja. So anyway, so they had pretty much all of South India under their control. And Krishna Devaraya, during his tenure, he also annexed Kalinga Empire, that is Odisha. So Gajapati, he led a campaign, victorious campaign. Then he defeated him. Got tribute. He became his vassal. All those things, but the kind of wealth, most of wealth that and the prosperity that the Vijayanagara Empire enjoyed in Krishnadevaraya's reign came from extraordinary trade, both inland trade and maritime trade. And some of the greatest ports included the Coromandel, what is known as Coromandel in English, that coast. And on this side, on the Arabian Sea, Honnavara, which is near Mangalore today. So that was one of the world's greatest trading hubs for spices and precious metals, precious items, corals, rubies, pearls, spices, which went out from India, basically. So it was bursting with money, comparable to post World War II American prosperity, right? The prosperity of US that people talk about actually occurred after World War II. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So at least the perception that we have today of that. So you can kind of compare it with that, Vijayanagara. Then you had extensive trade links with places like Iran, which was still Persia then. So Iran, even Afghanistan, of all places. So everybody wanted a piece of the Vijayanagara pie. So lots, and you should look at the building constructions there. I've written a 5-part piece on that. Just one indicator of any the zenith of prosperity is the demand for luxury goods. Okay, Krishna Devaraya had a separate ministry for making perfumes. One minister
Okay.
for perfume.
Okay. Okay. Mhm.
Okay, and people who were skilled in making perfumes, you name it. Okay, if anything was there in nature from which a new perfume could be extracted, you would find that in the factories, in the perfume making factories. Okay, then
Right.
you had all these, luxurious carpets, rugs. Elephants used to literally enjoy royal status. You had specialists who made decorations for elephants of all sizes, depending on, even they had a hierarchy. Even elephants had a hierarchy. For elephants, for horses. And if Mahanavami, if Mysore Dasara is so famous today, its origins come from Vijayanagara. So it was said that the whole wealth of the world would be concentrated in just this one city during Dasara, all those 9 days. So this was, I mean, you can go on and on. And houses, okay, people had now 100 by 100 and all these mansions, nothing. So these were what you call as middle class people, your typical average citizen. He would have 2 or 3 storied houses, and each story, you would have a separate niche just to watch moonlight.
Okay.
Okay, carvings. Inside the house you have pillars, right? If you have, most of us are familiar with these old style Hindu houses, how we used to build. So inside you would have typically pillars in the living room, in the veranda, all those places. You had exquisite carvings. Lot of those things, when the whole thing was destroyed, those carvings were smuggled all the way to Europe, where they fetched enormous prices. I'm talking about the pre-colonial era, 16th century, 16th and till the middle of 17th century. So you have a whole lot of evidence that shows this was a standard only. Then you had, gardens which were like mini forests behind the house, where you would have a pool and all kinds of birds would be there, peacocks would be there, rabbits would be there, assortment of parrots of different colors, shapes, and sizes would be there. They would be taught love songs, lyrical poetry, basically. Okay, and
Right.
then
Okay.
jewelry, both men and women. Jewelry was a prized item, and Krishna Deva Raya would frown upon, the mark of decency, for example, in the king's eyes. Mark of a cultured man was the tasteful jewelry, and both in terms of the craftsmanship as well as a quantity. So you would wear your earrings. Men typically didn't wear the nose ring, but earrings, a headband studded, your peta would be studded with all kinds of precious jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, and something called ganda pendera for your ankles. So without this, and of course, all these costly clothing, right, decorative clothing, you would wear all this and then only step out of the house. Otherwise, your what you call respectability, standing in the society, would come down.
Okay.
Okay, I
There
can go
was
on.
there was no Gandhi-like figure at that time, is it?
No, no, not at all. So, so look, these people, what is known as zeitgeist, or the spirit of the age, right? That was larger than life. They wrote long poetry. They ate copiously. They exercised like hell. They were generous to a fault. They honored the wise people truly, in the real sense of the word, not just giving away some Padma award or something like that. And they would honor spiritual people, give them bath, give them whatever, give whatever facilities they wanted. If they were going on a Tirtha Yatra, they would give them, lavish endowments, just like that. Acha, ab Tirupati ja rahe ho. Okay, here it is. Take some 3-4 kgs worth of necklace would be given. So this was the spirit of the age. It was larger than life. People lived extravagantly. They donated extravagantly, and they also attained moksha in a very grand fashion.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what would you say about the uh, literary and artistic accomplishments of that period?
Hmm.
And also, what was the social organization and the military organization like?
Okay, I have to summarize this very quickly. So
Yes.
first point is,
And
yeah,
next question would be asked by Vibhuti Ji. So, Vibhuti Ji,
okay, yeah,
please
get ready.
be ready with your questions.
Let me finish this quickly. So, literature, copious amount of literature was produced throughout, as long as that grand empire existed. So, during the 14th century, especially in, sorry, Praudadevaraya or Devaraya II, during his rule, Kannada literature flourished, which is the era in which a great Kannada poet, Kumara Vyasa, is known as Narayanappa. So he produced Karnata Bharata Katha Manjari, which is a Kannada rendition of Vedavyasa's Mahabharata. So it is still a classic. It occupies the same reverential status that Vyasa Rishi's original does. So, and then you had a lot of these Vachana saints, Shaiva saints. They composed, a lot of these devotional literature, and but it was Telugu literature that actually, took wings during the later part of the Vijayanagar Empire, and especially in the rule of Krishnadevaraya. So you had these famous Ashta Diggajas, which means, eight gems, eight literary gems in Krishnadevaraya's time. All of them speak of their monarch with such affection, with such love, with such feeling. It brings tears to your eyes. So I think one poet, I forget his name, so I don't want to invoke a wrong name. So after his patron king dies, he writes a very, very heartfelt poem. He says, Where can we find someone like you again, who is the very avatar of Narsimha, and he laments. It's very moving. So the best of Telugu literature, and both in terms of the prolificity of the output as well as quality, it emerged during Krishnadevaraya's time, or during the later part of the Vijayanagar Empire. So most of it, they had continued to remain popular. A lot of stanzas, lot of verses, lot of episodes from these literature of that time are still used in popular Telugu cinema even today.
Okay,
So
that's
yeah,
wonderful.
mainstream commercial
What was the language of the empire?
language. Okay, that's a good point. So I'm glad you brought this up, because all these kings were patrons of learning. Okay, you didn't have this language battles that we unfortunately have, which had been engineered, after independence, sadly, because almost all Hindu kings were patrons of learning, and they accorded a high place to, poets and literateurs and scholars. So Krishnadevaraya, for example, he patronized scholars from as far as Nadia, Navadvipa today in Bengal. That is a hellhole today now. So they would come all the way, travel all the way to Hampi, to Vijayanagara, seek an audience, and they were patronized from Orissa, from Tamil Nadu, from Karnataka, obviously, because it was a Kannada empire basically. So from Karnataka, from Andhra, that is Telugu, all Tamil, all these languages were patronized. So when you say official language, there was no one official language in the sense that we understand it today, but uh, what was widely understood, the lingua franca and all that, were typically Kannada and Telugu. And in the Tamil dominions, it was obviously Tamil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So your next question was military
Yes,
organization. Yeah,
social and
military.
military organization.
Yeah, okay. So we'll do the military organization first. Uh, Militarily, okay, politically, the whole empire was divided roughly into four or five major divisions. One, like I mentioned, the Goa side, so that covers your Arabian Sea, and then you had the southern side, which included Tamil Nadu, and then the center, which is which intersects today's Andhra and Karnataka. So if Vijayanagar or Hampi, what we know as Hampi today, if that was a capital, so all the regions lying, this side and that side, south of Vijayanagara, all these places were administratively classified into one unit. Then the northern part, which was the most vulnerable or the most dangerous border, which was shared with the Bahmani kings, Muslim rulers. So that was another administrative unit. And you had what you call governors for each of these provinces, these administrative units, and a standing army which comprised a large elephant force, a substantial horse force, both cavalry, infantry, huge number of foot soldiers, in running into God knows how many lakhs, and then it also could boast of a very very strong navy, and these were all commanded by Dandanayakas or Dannayakas, which means uh, you can call them commanders or generals, roughly speaking. And under them, they had different Nayakas, Palegars, which means Palegars were typically chieftains who swore allegiance, sent revenue, sent their troops, and were generally loyal to the imperial king. So each time a major or a minor battle, wherever it was fought, so these contingents from the main imperial army would sometimes go there depending on the battle, or these palegars or polygars, they would send their forces. So this is pretty much how the military was structured. I'm simplifying it in a very very brutal fashion, but I hope you get an idea. So that is the military part. And social thing, actually we can do a separate episode, but here's the thing. It was the classical, they adhere to the classical Hindu social organization, Varnashrama Dharma. Because if there was one thing that the Vijayanagara people had promised, the rulers had promised from day one, was to maintain something called Purvada Maryade. It is a Kannada term meaning the respect given or sustaining the old traditions intact. So everything, even in small matters as a village dispute, they would refer back to the earlier traditional precept. Okay, how was this done during the Chola period in the 10th century? I'm just kind of dumbing it down in a manner of speaking, and then they would adhere to those principles. Now, if a new tax reform had to be introduced or a new tax had to be levied, the administration would take care, it would make an announcement, it would seek the consent of the people. And if they said no, it would be dropped. Okay, so this was, this pretty much this old respecting old traditions was maintained even in the social organization. So you know the four varnas there. So because you have four varnas, people shouldn't assume this nonsense that is current today. All the lower castes are oppressed and this and that. That is entirely untrue, actually. Okay, parts.
Actually, there is no evidence of any oppression at all.
That's right. No.
So, see,
Not
whatever,
even, not
no,
even a little
whatever
flogging here
little
and
was
there.
there, no, Sanjay ji, whatever little was there, it happens in every society. Even today, whether the British accepts it or not, and anyway, Britain is inconsequential in any scheme of things. So, it is a deeply class-driven society. It is a very status-conscious society. Okay, so anyway, back to this. That will go somewhere else. So, this and see the people of those days belonging to whichever varna. Okay, when they did not complain about this existing system, in fact, they embraced it wholeheartedly. As long as their Varna rules, as long as their traditions were not infringed upon, they were happy living in this social organization. You have tons of inscriptions, and I think I'll do a series on that later on Dharma Dispatch. Tons of inscriptions which show this. Last week, I'd done a piece on how two very enterprising barbers they gained royal prominence and they are invited and honored in the court of Sadashivaraya, the last Vijayanagara king. They were barbers. I don't know, wonder what godforsaken classification today it falls. They fall under, but anyway. So they shared the court manners there. They were honored guests. In fact, this one barber, okay, his name is Kandoja. So one poet comes, okay, he's seeking royal patronage, but for some reason he doesn't get an audience in the court. So he hears of this Kandoja's generosity and his thing, and he approaches him. He says, look, this is my problem, and my path to being to patronage is being blocked by a lot of jealous people, so help me. So this guy listens to him patiently. He's convinced of this guy's, he's genuine. So he uses his influence and gets him patronage in the court. He's a barber. Oppressed lower caste, really? And these are all political, and we don't need to take them seriously anyway. So and they were very happy with this social setup. And a lot of them were honored because of the professions they followed. Okay. So anyway, we had a class of singers called bhattars. Their only job was and they had generational memory of other people's lineages. Okay. So anyway, this was roughly the social organization. There was a lot of economic mobility.
Right.
You have examples of what are today known as prostitutes. Okay. I can give you at least 2,000 examples. I have that much of documentation. I'm not blowing my trumpet or anything, but these are the facts. At least 2,000 examples of Devadasis. Okay, in Telugu country, even today, they are called Sani. Okay, Devadasis basically. they have built, I mean, prolific number of lakes throughout South India. So what nonsense are these guys talking about anyway? So this is pretty much the social organization aspect of it. Anyway, that deserves a independent volume which can run up to 2,000, 3,000
Anyway,
pages easy.
we can definitely take today's show as an introductory kind of a
Yeah.
show. Of course, I would request all my audience to please start asking questions, and
Hmm.
also to share this video, or to like it, and to go into our description and support us and follow us. Vibhuti ji?
I'm enjoying the classroom, and
Hmm.
this is
So,
one of those moments in my time when you are on TV and yet your mouth is shut, and it's a good feeling. Sandeep ji, thank you so much. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
the
You're very kind,
education. But you
very
made a
generous.
very interesting and very powerful statement,
Hmm.
and that statement is, I'm going to use it with
Hmm.
your permission or without.
Go ahead,
I'm
knowledge is.
You said economic development, when the economic development happens, the demand for luxury goods go high. And
Yes.
whatever little I know of the Vijayanagar Empire,
Hmm.
it was a very prosperous era, both with
Yes.
temple architecture, both with the honoring of the students and the literature and people, gyanis and everything else. The important part here is that they knew the democracy, the democratic way of functioning.
Hmm.
They sowed the seeds of functioning of democracy. But the issue is, why didn't we learn anything from it? Is it because we were so badly decimated,
Hmm.
annihilated by the Muslim rulers? Because Krishna Dev Rai gave access to Portuguese,
Hmm.
which, after the destruction of the Vijayanagar Empire, led
Hmm.
to Goa Inquisition. Think
Hmm.
about it.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's a very important lesson in life that when you form your alliance, be
Hmm.
aware of the potential consequences of the acts of others. The other thing which I wanted to also take back is that the Battle of Talikota was decided on January 26th.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, that's our Republic Day. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself. I
yes,
think
so I just wanted to focus on the economic
I have
and
to ask
democratic
a few
perspective.
things before Battle of Talikota.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
All right. So I'll address that. Yeah. Well, all points well taken, Vibhuti ji. The thing is, this has been the bane. Your last point that you mentioned about, you're so badly decimated, that has been the bane of all Hindu empires. That,
No,
this
let me ask about before we get to Battle of
Okay,
Talikota.
that's
So
fine.
Battle
okay.
of Talikota. Uh,
Okay.
how did the Vijayanagar kings start relying on these mercenaries?
Hmm.
Because as I understand, that wasn't the original scheme of things. So
Hmm.
why did they have to start recruiting and appeasing the mercenaries, as Ramaraya II
Hmm.
supposed to have done?
Hmm. No, no, this, okay, great point. So you have to go back. So this takes us all the way back to the initial days, okay, of Mahmud of Ghazni's invasion. This fellow, Anandapala, or his son, Anandapala, or his son or grandson or his father, I forget his name. So he's defeated by Mahmud of Ghazni, right? Jayapala Deva's son or grandson, one of the two. So he says that, okay, you want to go invade further into Indian territory. Now that I've accepted you, now that I've accepted you as my overlord, it is my duty as your vassal to assist you in your battles. So a lot of Muslim kings, Muslim invasions, Muslim conquests of other Hindu kingdoms were effected by Hindu soldiers in the in the invaders' army. So when you say that Krishnadevaraya recruited Muslim troops in his own army, So you have a history dating back so many years, so many centuries. And on the other side also the scene is the same. There were a lot of Muslim kings who employed Hindu soldiers. But this does not mean to say that, therefore Hindu rulers is equal to Islamic invaders. You can't draw that equation based on this.
Yeah, of course, the concept of the doctrine of war is completely different.
Simple. That's it. So
Total
this
war
was,
against war of combatants. So
yeah.
that's completely
So
different.
this was a fundamental failing on the part of these people saw themselves as guardians of their own empire. A lot of these Hindu kings. So, in the interest of truthfulness, objectivity, fairness, this was a glaring failure on their part. It was a weakness. Like I mentioned in my book, right? This happened because of the loss of Aryavarta consciousness. Once that was gone, then all these consequences were only logical.
Another thing is that they're supposed to have gone to the extent of recruiting such commanders who would not bow before the king, and in order to make
Yes,
a pretense
yes,
of
yes,
having
yes.
them bow before the king, they would keep a Quran
They would
next
keep
to
a
them on
Quran
the
next to
throne.
the throne.
When
So
did this practice begin?
this began unfortunately with Vijayanagar only.
No, which king?
Krishnadevaraya also did it. Ramaraya did. Ramaraya technically was not a king, but he was a real power behind the throne. Sadashivaraya.
That means that there wasn't enough Purva Paksha done on the nature of the Islamic beast.
Exactly, exactly. None of our scholars are great Hindu scholars, Pandits. With due reverence to them, they did not care to read the Quran. We had to wait till Swami Dayananda Saraswati came on the scene. That is 19th century.
19th century. What a terrible thing to. Now, on to the Battle of Talikota.
No, the Battle of Talikota is very. I have only one thing to say that the Golconda, Bijapur, and all they formed the alliance. They were supposedly irritated, or
Hmm,
they did not like the Vijayanagar Empire,
hmm,
establishing
hmm,
its own
hmm.
hegemony kind of thing.
They
So
did not like the Vijayanagar defeating them one by one,
yes, one
Yes.
by
time and
one.
again.
So they colluded. They colluded. The word collusion comes in there. They
Hmm, hmm.
colluded, and then it is said that there are two reports on that. One is that his Muslim generals, sabotaged him,
Gilani
and
brothers.
also
Gilani
the fact that
brothers.
one of his very good generals died in the war, and the
Hmm.
entire army lost. What is the truth about it?
Okay, I've written a thing on Battle of Talikota on Dharma Dispatch. It's a fairly long essay, long form. You
Okay,
can read the details in that. But
okay,
broadly speaking, what you say is, historically, there's historical evidence for that.
okay.
The major two things happened on the battlefield, on the actual battlefield. One was the defection of a large contingent of Muslim soldiers within the Vijayanagara army, and that betrayal was led by Gilani brothers. You see the name Gilani, what
Yeah,
all
I was just going
connotations?
to ask the same Gilanis who are now in Kashmir.
Same thing,
Afghans.
same.
This
Yeah.
is an
The
Afghan surname.
Yeah,
DNA will be the same. So anyway,
DNA will be the same. Good one, good one. Yeah.
so that was one. And Ramaraya himself, one major important general dying on the battlefield to an extent is true, but a uh, lot of factors came together for that kind of a crushing defeat to occur. One, Ramaraya was extremely old. He was, I think, what, 85 or something.
Oh,
That is no age to lead a battle in the front. Okay, and that should also tell you the kind of prowess and military strength that we had, sheer brutal strength. That at 80, you get on an elephant lead an entire army of something like 4 or 5 lakhs of huge number. So a lot of factors came together, betrayal, then a lot of disarray happened on the battlefield, and bad planning, bad strategy, confusion. So everything that shouldn't happen. See, sometimes one battle, where you have a sure shot chance at victory, that can turn into a defeat with just one small insignificant episode, or some freak accident or something like that. But in this case, everything came together. So
Right.
it's like this classic story of a bald guy. Okay, he goes out in the sun, and he feels dizzy, and he feels thirsty, and then he goes and he finds some pool of water, only to find that it is muddy water. Then he's fatigued, and as he goes, trudges along, a mad dog chases him. So somehow, to escape that mad dog, he finally runs and escapes from it, and sits underneath a coconut tree. Within 2 seconds, the coconut falls on his bald head and smashes it into two. So this is Talikota.
I hope you were not referring to you were not inspired by my bald
Oh,
head,
no,
but
no,
be
no.
that
I'm
as
also bald. I'm also bald here, so it applies to me as well.
yeah. That's a very good way to say
But
it.
the empire did not finish with
That's
Talikota.
right.
Yeah, the empire did not finish. Actually, uh, the devastation of Hampi, Vijayanagar, and the surroundings was so horrific that it left a permanent scar. That is one. Two, it could never regain that. When such an imperial umbrella like thing, power, political power, is smashed to bits in such a fashion, the pieces can never come back again. This was not a setback. Previous Vijayanagara kings had suffered setbacks on and off, but nothing, actually shattered their empire on this scale. So, I mean, it went along for about another 150 years, if I'm not mistaken, but it could never regain its political power or its territories.
Okay.
That
It,
is
it,
a
it
that
it
is a
got
crux.
largely confined to the Telugu territories after that, is it?
Yeah, yeah, more or less Penukonda, in and around Ballari, Anegundi, that region.
Right.
Hmm.
I think we are ripe for audience questions. So
Okay.
let's go straight into audience questions. And of course, we take this only as an introduction. And there are aspects of Vijayanagar Empire which
Hmm.
we may have to revisit.
Hmm.
Okay, on to questions. Avijit Sudhakar, Vijayanagar helped us, Sri Vaishnavas, get back our Sri Rangam temple,
Hmm. Hmm.
which was plundered by Ulu Khan Tughlaq.
Hmm.
12,000 Sri Vaishnavas were killed by him.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a statement.
Yeah, that's a statement. So that was during that Madurai Sultanate period, I guess.
Yeah, Madurai Sultanate. Not no, preceding Madurai Sultanate. During this fellow, Ulugh Khan is none other than Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So one of his generals, I forget his name, he invades Sri Rangam, and pretty much. I mean, that was a very dark period. That invasion was a very dark period. Vedanta Deshikar, one of the celebrated Sri Vaishnava saints, he had to carry the Ranganatha Mula Murti amidst great difficulty, carry it to Karnataka, go into hiding, that kind of thing. And it was under Kamparaya, Veera Kamparaya, who was a prince back then. So I think Harihara's son or Bukka's son, one of the two. So he was the one who goes out to campaign to liberate Madurai from the Madurai Sultanate people. On that campaign, one of his generals named Veera Gopanarya, he's a person who actually kills that Muslim governor who is controlling Srirangam, and then restores the temple and to its former glory. So that's what he's referring to.
Okay. Next. Vamsi Krishna, alas, only if they had used some of their wealth to study Islam and strengthened war strategy and war tactics, stopped relying on imported horses.
Okay. Another statement. Largely agree with it. Yeah.
Next, Vijay Sudhakar. Was Tenali Rama real? Why
Tilarama
Birbal
was
so?
real. Yes, he was real.
Is Birbal based on him?
That there is some fights on Twitter, but if you want the historical version, uh, for lack of evidence, we will have to keep it in suspended animation.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
the fights may continue.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
Shant, namaskar all. Sandeep, I am from Karnataka. Balakrishna sir, kindly suggest a book about Vijayanagar Empire. I have read only in bits. Kindly start a YouTube channel in Kannada.
Okay. Well, a lot of this thing is good. Forgotten Empire by Robert Sewell, but it has to be taken with a pinch of salt. So, and you have Surya Narayana Rao's Never to Be Forgotten Empire. And there are some, random works, sources of Vijayanagar history. But unfortunately, there is no one volume which gives you the authentic, overall comprehensive history of Vijayanagar.
Okay.
That is a
So that's a
tragedy.
task. That's a task
That
for you.
is that is a task.
For you.
Hmm.
Uh,
For me. Okay.
Krishna
Response.
Sundar. What were borders of Mughal Empire in its peak? I mean, we are discussing Vijayanagar Empire. Where does Mughal
I
Empire
don't.
come into it?
I don't think that's relevant.
Next. Shanta Sandeep sir, what was the Vijayanagar Empire boundaries? Yeah.
That
I
makes
think we
sense.
discussed that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of South India plus parts of Odisha, both Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, south of Vindhyas, basically. That was the
Okay.
rough borders. Yeah.
Next. Shri Harsha sir, I am from AP. Unfortunately, despite Islamic invasion, casteism is stronger than nationalism here. Post TDP, AP, and Telugu mostly are brutally secular. Our media is also unapologetically left casteist. So that's a piece of information.
Yeah. Show me one state which doesn't have this, not just AP. Show me one state which doesn't have this.
I think the issue
Next.
is about conversion is big there. That is why AP is
Yeah,
looking
that
at it. And
after
they are
this
giving
Vice
concessions
Reddy.
after concessions to
Yeah, yeah,
Muslims and Christians. So that's what is a problem.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. He's mixed. Anyway, next question. Yeah.
Next question, please. Santosh Shrikantaya. Great insight. Please talk about contributions of Shankar Math in the founding of empire.
Well, it did play a lot of very pivotal role, in fact, in not so much in founding of the Vijayanagara Empire, although okay, the centrality why Shankara Matha in Sringeri becomes so important to Vijayanagar is because of the status that it has enjoyed, for 700 years before that. Okay, but the Hoysalas they patronized it, and the generals of Hoysalas, like I mentioned, Hariyappa Nayaka Wadeyar, then the Sangama brothers, they would regularly pay visits to the Shankar Matha, to Sringeri, and it was kind of regarded as a quasi, if not an official, spiritual guidance center for the Vijayanagara Empire. So there is a lot of details, but I don't think I can cover it in this space. But yes, it did uh, play a huge role, as long both preceding the founding of Vijayanagar Empire and towards the end of it as well.
Next. Saurav Parmar. Telugu land is becoming center of Christians. Why? Anyway, that's not the topic today, Sauravji. We'll move on. Krishna Sundar, SB Garu. Why Rayalaseema couldn't get back its glory?
Well, Ballari also couldn't get back its glory. Rest of South India also couldn't get back its glory. Nothing special about Rayalaseema. By the way, the name itself, Rayalaseema, Seema means a region or a territory or border, seam, whatever. So, Seema in Rayalaseema is the region of the Rayas, literally translated. So, Rayalaseema, the land of kings, the land of Rayas. So, well,
Okay.
the answer is that if all of South India couldn't get back its glory of Vijayanagar Empire, I don't see how Rayalaseema can be an exception to that.
Next. Mahesh Madhurji, thank you so much. Thank you. Arshad Malve, is this the most conducive era of Bharat in terms of civilizational war? Since many of us Kafirs have studied the Kitabs. Good question.
Good question.
Very good question, in fact. Very, very good question. Actually, this is a most conducive era in this, the civilizational war. But the war, the realization, the reawakening has come a little too late. And it has come amid an extremely, in a time of extreme crisis. If this awakening had been, it was there anyway during 1947, it was there to a great extent, but we'll not go there. uh, People who have studied, Kafirs who have studied, as you say, the Kitabs, they, while some of them have political power, they don't have the, again, it all boils down to a lot of things. One is the willingness to use that political power, two, the sheer ruthlessness that it requires. I will not mince my words. I don't need any awards, and I'm not a film star or a celebrity, but this is a reality. The reason Vijayanagara was feared, in spite of its kings not having studied Quran or Islamic scripture, the reason they were feared was because the Bahmanis and other, Muslim powers, the Bahmanis knew that if push came to shove, they could be equally ruthless as the Muslims, if not more. The best example for this is the Battle of Raichur, that cemented Vijay Krishna Devaraya's valor like no other episode in his career.
So,
So
what,
I don't
what
know.
happened there?
No, Battle of Raichur was that I think Sultan of Bidar or Golconda, one of those guys came in to attack Vijayanagara, Krishna Devaraya. This guy gave him warning. Look, you are playing with fire. Don't tempt me. So that fellow tried to cross Krishna River, and Krishna Devaraya went after him. And the moment he saw that this guy means business and the devastation that he, unleashed on the Muslim army, he went back. Krishna Devaraya said, I will not stop till I have your neck. So there was a lull for some time where, that retreating Sultan, Bahmani Sultan, was camped. Then he sent a message through his envoy saying, look, please forgive me. Spare my life. मुझे माफ करो. You take whatever tribute you want, whatever war indemnity you want. Please spare my life. So Krishna Devaraya, what he says? He says there is no way I'm going to spare you. So on one condition, I'll spare you. You come alone to my camp, lick my feet. Then perhaps I might think of forgiving you. So then he stormed into the city and, rest of it, liberated it, whatever. That's a different story. So this is a spirit you need to have.
Right. Next. Mahesh Madhurji, thank you. Thank you. You're so very kind. Always a great help. Saurabh Kulkarni, Sanjay sir, I am from Karnataka. Hampi, Halabidu, Pattadakallu, and Badami are very beautiful places. Please do visit. Thank
He's
you.
invited you. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the invite. Next. Saurabh Kulkarni, do you think Vijayanagar Empire fell into the hands of jihadis easily because Vijay is
No,
Vibhuti
no.
Jha. The
Vijayanagar,
empire
Vijay.
paid more attention to art, architecture, literature, devotion, and
Eh,
less
no,
to
no, no,
military.
no, 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 no. He is mixing up a lot of things here. Vijay, you know, just to set the facts right, Vijayanagara Empire did not fall into the hands of jihadis easily. There is a reason the Battle of Talikota is called a seminal battle. It's called a decisive battle. It did not fall. In fact, it was a battle to be won. Ramaraya went out there to crush those guys. They didn't fall into the hands of jihadis easily. Call it fate, call it bad luck, call it whatever the factors that I mentioned, earlier. That's how it was destroyed. They didn't fall into their hands easily. So the rest of the points, become irrelevant in light of this.
Okay, next. How much contact this empire had with the other empires
I think I've
in
answered that.
India?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
I
answered.
think so. We can pass over. Prashant Gupta, Namaskar to Balakrishna ji and Sanjay ji and Vibhuti ji. Robert Swell mentions that Vijayanagar had 7 layers of walled fortification.
Hmm.
How the 7 layers were breached behind a retreating army after Battle of Talikota.
Well, the distance from Vijayanagar to Talikota is a few hundred miles. Not few hundred miles, but Talikota is an open battlefield. They didn't enter the city and try to breach the fort. That's not true. Talikota is
Next.
something like the plain of Panipat or things like that.
Oh, what I think he's talking about the destruction of
The city.
Vijayanagar, the city.
Yeah. City.
No, the city is different. Once the king himself fell, the army was routed. Right? The capital city was left defenseless. You had lot of large number of civilian population. What can they do against a few lakh of invading combined armies of four Bahamani sultans? Which city can withstand that? A defenseless city made of unarmed civilian population. So the
Next.
fortification will also go. Everything will go.
Next. Prashant Gupta, did the Mughal and Chinese guns, then a new technology, plays a massive role on the battlefield of Talikota with copper coins as cannonballs, while Indian armies were still relying on bows and arrows almost 40 years after First Battle of Panipat.
No, no, this is mixing a lot of things. I don't think I can't answer this really. I mean, this is, I've heard many theories, but this is something else.
Okay.
I can't answer.
Vijay Kumar. Namaste, sir. Sandeep, sir. Are you planning to write a book series on Vijayanagar Empire or some course so that it would destroy the current negative narrative and bring the glory back of Vijayanagara?
No, no book, nothing planned at the moment. No.
Okay. Next.
My follow-up question: why not?
Well, I simply don't have the time. I'm involved in many different things. So,
Okay. Next. Shirish M. PB Desai's A History of Karnataka is a good book to learn about Vijayanagara and Rashtrakuta empires. Thank
okay.
you. Next. Kaushik Bhattacharya ji, thank you. Sentryman01, Namaskar to everyone. Have you had a chance to talk to one of the heirs of the empire, also named Krishna Devaraya? His interview is on YouTube.
No, I haven't had the chance to talk to him. It's quite well known, on YouTube, I think on social media and other platforms. I haven't had the chance to talk.
Okay, next. Pancharputra. Was corruption one reason why empire was lost?
Next question, please.
That's the last one.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, we come to the end of the question answer session and also come to the end of the session. Thank you very much, Sandeep ji. We, I think, had a wonderful tutorial, introductory tutorial into Vijayanagar. I think many more to come. And thank
Thank
you,
you. It's
Vibhuti
my
Ji.
honor. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you, and I really enjoyed the session. So let
Me
me say
too.
that.
Me too. It was lovely,
Yes,
sharing all this.
yes.
So,
Jai
okay.
Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind.
Jai Vijayanagar.
Jai Vijayanagar.
Jai Vijayanagar. Yes, certainly.
Okay. Bye.